She whispered, "Close the door. We don't need an audience." And in that moment, everything changed. The story begins on an ordinary day that feels anything but ordinary once she enters the scene. Our narrator, a 24-year-old man with a quiet, observant nature, finds himself in a space that encourages lingering. Perhaps a late evening cafe filled with the soft hum of conversation, or a small, sunlit art gallery where the scent of old paper and paint hangs lightly in the air. He is there by chance, or perhaps instinct, seeking solitude and the gentle distraction of his own thoughts. And then he sees her. She moves with the kind of grace that only comes from confidence and experience. Her posture is relaxed yet precise, each motion seemingly effortless. The way she adjusts her scarf with one hand, fingers brushing lightly against her neck, or the way she tilts her head to study a painting or a book. It's impossible not to notice. There's an aura about her, quiet and composed, yet undeniably magnetic. Her eyes, calm and knowing, sweep the room before briefly resting on him. And for a moment he feels caught, exposed, and oddly seen. The first interactions are minimal, almost incidental. Polite smile as their paths cross, the briefest touch of hands when she passes him a book or exchanges change at the counter. But these small moments carry weight. Her presence lingers, like a faint perfume that clings to the air long after she has walked past. There's a subtle warmth in the way she moves closer in conversation, not overtly, but enough to make him notice the quiet intimacy forming in these ordinary gestures. The narrator becomes aware of his own reactions, a slight quickening of his heartbeat, a subtle awareness of the space between them, and the unexpected comfort that comes from her calm, steady presence. He listens intently to the way her voice carries, soft, articulate, soothing yet layered with unspoken authority. It's a voice that invites attention without demanding it, and he finds himself hanging on the pauses, the slight inflections, the moments where she seems lost in thought before glancing back at him with a faint, almost mischievous smile. As he observes, he begins to notice details that feel intimate in a way that words cannot capture. The way her hand lingers on the counter a second too long, the subtle shift in her posture when she senses his gaze, or the delicate rhythm of her breathing as she studies a book. There's a quiet electricity in these interactions, an unspoken awareness of each other's presence that neither yet dares to name. By the end of the scene, the narrator is left with a sense of anticipation he cannot quite define. He is drawn to her confidence, her quiet vulnerability, and the warmth that radiates from her without effort. The stage is set for a connection that promises to be slow, deliberate, and profoundly affecting. And in that fleeting, ordinary moment, he realizes that this encounter, brief and seemingly insignificant, is the beginning of something that will quietly, irresistibly change the course of his days. The next chapter of their connection begins with another ordinary day that feels charged the moment she enters the space. Perhaps at the shared workspace, a cozy library, or a late-night cafe that now seems almost fated to bring them together again. This time, the interaction isn't just visual. It's physical, subtle, yet undeniable. He notices her before she notices him. She's scanning the room, her movements measured, graceful, yet seemingly unself-conscious. There's an ease in the way she carries herself, a quiet authority softened by approachable warmth. When their paths cross, it's accidental at first. A hand brushing his as she reaches for a book, their shoulders nearly touching as they squeeze past each other. The touch is brief, almost imperceptible to anyone else, yet for him it resonates deeply. A pulse, a shiver, a reminder that proximity carries weight. As the interaction unfolds, he finds himself acutely aware of the space between them. Sitting side by side at a shared table or leaning close over a document, there's a conscious effort to maintain boundaries, but the physical closeness makes restraint nearly impossible. Every gesture becomes amplified. The way her hand hovers near his when she points at something, the subtle lean of her body as she listens to him speak, the way her hair falls softly across her shoulder when she tilts her head toward him. These small, intimate motions create an invisible thread connecting them, pulling their attention into a shared, quiet orbit. Their conversation, casual on the surface, carries layers of unspoken meaning. He notices how she pauses slightly before answering a question, a faint hesitation that suggests thoughtfulness, or perhaps the awareness of him watching her. Her laughter is soft, deliberate, and infectious, drawing him in without any overt effort. He realizes that he is not merely observing her. He is participating in her world in ways he never anticipated. Every glance feels deliberate, every shared smile lingering a moment longer than necessary. Yet, despite the growing closeness, there's an underlying tension. He catches himself stealing small glances when she's unaware, studying the curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, or the subtle grace in her movements. She, in turn, seems aware of his attention. There's a fleeting softness in her gaze when their eyes meet, a silent acknowledgement of the attraction simmering beneath the surface. Neither addresses it openly, yet both are keenly conscious of its presence. The sensory elements are heightened in these moments. The faint warmth of her hand as it brushes against his, the subtle scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the quiet cadence of her voice creating a rhythm that syncs with his own heartbeat. These details, small yet profound, pull him further into the magnetic field of her presence. By the end of this encounter, the narrator is left with a mixture of exhilaration and restraint. The accidental proximity has awakened a deeper awareness of her, of himself, and of the delicate tension that exists between them. Their connection is no longer merely visual. It is felt in every brush of skin, every shared laugh, every lingering look. The slow burn romance is quietly igniting, setting the stage for the deeper emotional intimacy that is yet to come. The story shifts into a quieter, more intimate space. Perhaps the setting is a dimly lit library after closing hours, a deserted park as dusk falls, or a small kitchen where they linger after a gathering. The world outside seems to fade, leaving just the two of them. And with this solitude comes an unspoken permission to lower the walls that had kept their interactions polite and restrained. She begins to speak, softly, in a way that feels almost hesitant, yet her words carry weight. Maybe she shares a memory, a quiet regret, or a personal challenge she rarely voices aloud. It is not a dramatic confession, but a simple, human truth that reveals vulnerability. His reaction is instinctive. He leans in slightly, attentive, offering the kind of listening that requires no judgment, no advice, only presence. His eyes follow her every movement, his body subtly oriented toward hers, signaling that he is fully there, entirely receptive. The emotional tension between them deepens. He feels the warmth of her presence more acutely now, not just as a fleeting attraction, but as a profound connection that touches the core of his being. When she pauses mid-story, perhaps to gather her thoughts, he notices the small, intimate details, the way her fingers trace the rim of a coffee cup, the faint flutter of her lashes, the subtle sigh that escapes her lips. Each gesture is magnified in the quiet, and in that silence, their bond strengthens. A fleeting touch occurs, her hand brushing against his arm, perhaps when emphasizing a point or accidentally as she gestures. The touch is light, almost accidental, yet it carries a weight neither can ignore. He feels a warmth spreading through him, not just physical, but emotional, a tether that binds him to this shared moment. It's a delicate balance. The intimacy of the contact is undeniable, yet restrained enough to maintain the graceful tension that has always defined their interactions. He listens not just to her words, but to the subtle rhythms of her voice, the soft rise and fall, the pauses that hint at unsaid thoughts, the quiet strength underlying her gentleness. There's a magnetic honesty in these moments, an invitation to be present, to witness her without distraction. And in turn, he begins to share a little of himself, small personal anecdotes, thoughts that reveal his own quiet depth, fostering a reciprocal trust that neither of them had expected. The sensory experience lingers. The faint scent of her perfume in the air, the soft brush of her sleeve against his arm, the warmth that radiates from her presence, and the subtle thrill of closeness that feels dangerously intimate yet entirely safe. Every detail cements the bond growing between them. By the end of this private exchange, something has shifted. The narrator realizes that attraction alone no longer defines his feelings. There is a growing emotional resonance, a sense that this connection, born of trust, quiet attention, and vulnerability, has the potential to deepen into something extraordinary. The slow-burn romance has evolved from curiosity and tension into genuine emotional intimacy, setting the stage for their first truly meaningful physical interaction in the next chapter. The story reaches a pivotal moment where emotional intimacy begins to bleed into subtle, meaningful physical connection. The setting is intimate, a softly lit study, a quiet terrace, or the corner of a nearly empty room after a gathering. The outside world fades as if it no longer exists, leaving just the two of them in a private bubble. It is here that she whispers the words that will linger in his mind long after. "Close the door. We don't need an audience." The whisper carries a weight beyond the simple request. It is both commanding and tender, a careful invitation that acknowledges the tension between them without pushing it into overt action. The narrator feels a shiver at the sound, his attention completely drawn into her orbit. There is a brief pause as he obeys, closing the door with deliberate slowness, the soft click echoing like a heartbeat in the enclosed space. For a moment, they simply stand there, the air charged with unspoken emotion. Their eyes meet, and the magnetic pull between them is undeniable. She moves slightly closer, the space shrinking to a delicate intimacy. Her hand brushes his accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, as she reaches to adjust something nearby. The touch lingers longer than necessary, and he feels the warmth of her skin, the subtle pressure that communicates reassurance, curiosity, and a quiet thrill all at once. His own hand twitches instinctively, as if wanting to return the touch, but pausing, aware of the moment's fragile beauty. He notices every detail. The way her hair falls across her shoulder when she tilts her head, the faint scent of her perfume that feels suddenly overwhelming in its closeness, and the rhythmic cadence of her breathing as she leans slightly toward him. There is a tension in the space between them, a silent question hanging in the air. How far can they go without breaking the delicate balance of respect and desire? As they reach for a shared object, a book, a glass of wine, or a paper on a desk, their hands meet again. This time, there is intention. Their fingers brush and linger, not out of accident but quiet acknowledgement. His heart beats faster, awareness sharpening with every subtle movement. There is the faint warmth of her palm, the slight pressure of her thumb against his hand, and the unspoken communication of trust and closeness that words could never capture. They exchange glances loaded with meaning. Her eyes are softer now, a mix of vulnerability and quiet invitation, while his own gaze betrays a careful mixture of awe, desire, and protective tenderness. It is a slow, deliberate dance, each movement measured, each touch weighted with significance, yet contained within the bounds of graceful restraint. By the end of this encounter, the narrator feels the undeniable shift. The slow burn attraction is no longer confined to fleeting glances or accidental touches. Emotional intimacy has begun to manifest physically in the gentle warmth of a hand on a wrist, the brush of a shoulder, the quiet closeness of two people navigating the first real step of connection. The whispered words, the closed door, and the lingering touch have created a moment neither will forget. A moment that promises that their bond, built on trust and subtle desire, is only beginning to deepen. After the intensity of their first lingering, intentional touch, the story delves into the tension that arises from hesitation, doubt, and unspoken feelings. Both the narrator and the older woman find themselves navigating the fragile boundary between attraction and restraint, aware that every look, every gesture, carries weight far beyond what they had experienced before. The narrator struggles internally. He is captivated by her confidence, her grace, and the quiet warmth she radiates. Yet he is painfully aware of the age difference and the social expectations that could complicate their connection. He questions whether his own feelings are appropriate or merely fleeting fascination. These thoughts play in his mind as he remembers the softness of her hand against his, the magnetic pull of her gaze, and the warmth of her whispered words. Each memory intensifies both his desire and his caution. She, too, wrestles with her emotions. Her composed exterior masks an inner uncertainty. While she feels drawn to his sincerity, his attentiveness, and the gentle energy he brings into her life, she hesitates, mindful of the differences in their life experience. There is a moment when she catches herself staring at him, aware that her feelings are deeper than she anticipated, and quickly looks away, almost startled by her own vulnerability. Their interactions in public spaces become charged with subtle tension. A fleeting brush of hands, a shared smile across a room, or the way their eyes meet and hold for a second too long, all serve as reminders of the growing connection. Yet they also test boundaries, each interaction carrying the unspoken question, how far can we allow this closeness to go without crossing an invisible line? The sensory awareness of their presence is heightened in these moments. He feels a shiver when her shoulder lightly touches his in passing, a brush so brief it could be dismissed, yet it resonates deeply. He notices the faint perfume clinging to the air after she leaves, the rhythm of her breathing during shared conversation, and the subtle changes in her expressions that reveal emotions she doesn't voice aloud. These details magnify his internal conflict, making the push-pull between desire and restraint almost tangible. Emotionally, this chapter is about friction, the tension between longing and hesitation, vulnerability and self-protection. Their connection is no longer accidental or casual. It has become meaningful, charged with intimacy that neither can ignore. Both are aware that every glance, every gesture, carries implications, and yet they are unable to fully step back. By the end of this part, the slow burn tension has reached a peak. Both characters are acutely conscious of their feelings and the unspoken attraction simmering between them. The stage is set for the eventual emotional breakthrough, where vulnerability, honesty, and subtle physical closeness will converge. The audience feels the anticipation and stakes. The emotional friction is both painful and exhilarating, drawing the viewer deeper into the story. After days of subtle glances, lingering touches, and emotional friction, the story reaches a tender emotional climax. The setting is intimate, softly lit, and removed from the gaze of others. Perhaps a cozy kitchen after an evening gathering, a quiet terrace under the stars, or a small lounge illuminated by the warm glow of a lamp. In this private space, the barriers that had restrained their connection begin to dissolve, giving way to honesty, vulnerability, and the quiet acknowledgement of what has been growing between them. She speaks first, her voice hushed, carrying a weight that he senses immediately. Perhaps she recounts a fear of vulnerability, the loneliness of experience, or the hesitation of allowing herself to care for someone younger. Her words are careful yet raw, revealing a side of her rarely seen by anyone else. The narrator listens intently, leaning slightly forward, the warmth of his presence unspoken but palpable. He notices the small details, the faint tremor in her fingers as she gestures, the subtle quiver in her voice, and the softness of her gaze when it meets his eyes. In response, he begins to share, too, not with grand declarations, but with quiet truths about his own feelings, his admiration for her strength and grace, and the way her presence has quietly transformed his days. Each word is measured, honest, and carefully delivered, as if acknowledging the delicacy of the moment is as important as expressing the emotions themselves. Their conversation flows naturally, punctuated by pauses where silence speaks louder than words. Physical intimacy follows in the most natural, human way. She reaches for his hand, fingers curling around his with gentle confidence. He feels the warmth of her palm, the steady rhythm of her pulse beneath his touch, and the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat as they sit close together. She leans into him slightly, her cheek brushing his chest, and he feels the subtle lift of her breath, the reassurance of her closeness. These touches are neither rushed nor forceful. They are slow, deliberate, and charged with meaning, conveying affection, trust, and the unspoken desire that has been building between them. Every detail is amplified in the intimacy of the moment. The faint scent of her perfume mingles with the warmth of the room. The soft rustle of her clothing, the subtle shift of her body as she moves closer, the lingering glances that speak volumes, all contribute to an atmosphere thick with tenderness. Their emotional connection, nurtured over time through quiet observation, shared secrets, and subtle gestures, now finds expression in both words and touch. By the end of this chapter, the narrator and the older woman have reached a profound emotional understanding. The hesitation and internal conflict that had defined their interactions are replaced with trust and mutual acknowledgement of their feelings. Desire is present, but it is tempered by respect and care. The slow-burn romance reaches its emotional peak here, a culmination of subtle touches, hushed words, and the quiet affirmation of an intimate bond that is as emotional as it is physical. The audience experiences a sense of fulfillment. The tension that had been simmering since their first encounter is resolved in a moment of warmth, closeness, and vulnerability. The stage is now set for the story's final resolution, where this deepened bond will find its gentle, satisfying conclusion. After the emotional crescendo of their quiet confession, the story shifts to a serene, fulfilling closure. The intensity of hesitation and longing softens into calm, natural companionship, marking the beginning of a tender, mutually acknowledged bond. The setting mirrors this tranquility, perhaps a quiet terrace bathed in the soft glow of sunset, a cozy living room where the fire casts gentle shadows, or a small cafe corner where they return for comfort and routine. The world feels slower here, allowing them space to simply exist together. The narrator notices the subtle differences in the way they interact now. There is no longer the heightened tension of anticipation or the cautious restraint of unspoken attraction. Their touches are intentional, yet comfortable, her hand finding his as they walk, their shoulders brushing naturally as they share conversation, the simple, quiet act of leaning close to read a menu or a book together. Each gesture, small and unassuming, carries a depth of meaning born from the emotional intimacy they've cultivated. He feels a profound sense of belonging in her presence. There is warmth in the simple press of her palm against his, reassurance in the gentle squeeze she gives when their fingers intertwine, and a quiet joy in the way her laughter lingers in the air. She, in turn, seems lighter, more open, her confidence now paired with a visible tenderness toward him. Their interactions are playful at times, serious at others, but always infused with mutual respect and understanding. The sensory details heighten the moment. He notices the comforting weight of her presence beside him, the soft rustle of her hair as it brushes his arm, the faint perfume that has become familiar and reassuring, and the rhythm of her breathing as they sit together in silence. There's an ease in their proximity, a natural closeness that requires no words, no explanation. Even in quiet moments, the unspoken connection between them speaks volumes, affirming that their bond is both deep and enduring. Emotionally, this part of the story emphasizes fulfillment rather than climax. The tension has resolved into a tender companionship built on trust, shared vulnerability, and subtle romance. Their connection is no longer just about desire. It is about understanding, mutual care, and the quiet thrill of being fully seen and accepted. Every glance, every gentle touch, every laugh shared in this space reinforces the depth of their relationship. As the scene closes, the narrator reflects on how far they've come. From curious glances in a crowded room, accidental touches, and whispered confessions, to a comfortable, intimate bond that is both emotionally and physically satisfying. The age difference, while still present, is acknowledged subtly through their ease with one another and the maturity of their conversation. The story ends with a quiet, heartwarming image, perhaps their hands intertwined as they step outside together, or her head resting lightly on his shoulder while they share a laugh over something small. It is a moment of perfect, gentle intimacy, an affirmation that their slow-burning romance has grown into something steady, respectful, and profoundly human. The audience is left with a sense of completion, a lingering warmth that stays long after the story ends.